By the end of this video, you will know how to do three things. 1. How to properly use a React hook form in your Next.js project. 2. How to use Zod and master it for better developer experience when it comes to validating your form fields. This tool will allow you to write less and cleaner code. And finally, 3. How to push a UI notification so you make sure the user knows the form data was submitted successfully. So let's just push the button. Boom, there you have it. And this is the data that was submitted. You're still here, and that tells me you want to learn field validation, error handling, dynamic user UI. If you want to code along, just do this. Access the starter code, download the zip folder, open it, drag it inside Visual Studio Code like I did, open the terminal, type npm i to install everything, type npm run dev and press enter, and you will get the exact same contact form in terms of UI, but in our tutorial tab, if we press the send button, nothing actually happens. In our final project, if we press the button, of course, we are validating the fields, therefore we cannot send an email with empty fields. So let's make it work. Let's now, in just one go, install all of the packages that we are going to need for this tutorial. I'm going to press enter. All the packages are imported at the top, and because we are going to use a hook, we need to use useClient. Because we have installed React hook form, we have access to the useForm function imported at the top of this file. And this means that we can now destructure a bunch of things like register that will allow us to get the data submitted by the user. As you can see, in all the inputs, I'm using the register and I'm getting the username, name, email, and message. Now, after getting the user data, you need a way to handle the data submission. You can use handle submit from React hook form to make your custom onForm submit function work. Okay? So now when the send button gets clicked, this will handle the data submission, but because you're using TypeScript, there's a bit more of work to do. But thankfully, we are using Zod here, and that means we can not only define the schema for our form, we can also define all of the types easily and infer them. Okay? So now our use form is aware of our schema that is also type safe. We now should have a working contact form and we should be able to submit the data. So I'm just gonna fill all of this, click send email, and boom, we have it here. Because this is actually all that our function is doing. So our onForm submit function that runs, okay, is doing this. Okay, so the form is submitting, but this is obviously not good enough. We are not validating any field. So let's take care of that. Earlier in this tutorial, we created our full Zod schema, but the main goal was to deal with TypeScript. You can see that for each field, we defined the type as a string using Zod, so z.string. This means there's no need for us to go ahead and create the types ourselves, okay? But if you look closely, you will see that we also added the validation. We are defining the mean length for our strings, what fields are optional, and so on. But Zod is not yet connected to our React hook form. That task will be done using a Zod resolver that we are importing already at the top of this file. So at this point, you can even submit an empty form. So if I click the send button, as you can see, I submitted the data, but all of the fields are empty. So let's just use Zod resolver to fix this problem. I have now added this object, and this is going to connect the React hook form to Zod schema. So this is gonna make Zod kick in and make sure that all of this is good before submitting the data. So if you now refresh and try to submit the empty form, look, you cannot do anything because this field is required, and actually you need to have at least 6 characters. Until you type 6 characters, you cannot continue. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just 5, I click, I still cannot. I click one more, I click, because now I have 6 characters. I move it on to the email field, and notice that the name is optional. That's why it jumped from this field to this one. Now I need to provide a valid email. So if I just type email, it's not gonna do it. If I add the @ sign, I click, still it's not going to allow me to submit, because if you're doing this validation on your own, you normally look for this symbol, and if you get it, you allow the user to proceed. But in this case, behind scenes, Zod is doing more. So I'm gonna add gmail.com, I'm gonna press the button, still cannot of course submit the data because there's one more field that is required. And all of the fields are required by definition unless you explicitly tell that they are optional. Okay, so now I need a message and I need at least 1 character. So I'm gonna type 1 digit, whatever, and I click send email, and I should get the information submitted. Cool, as you can see, this is working. We now have the React hook form working, and Zod schema is also validating everything and helping us with TypeScript. But guess what? The user is not getting any feedback. The user doesn't know what's going right or wrong. Let's fix this. Now with the help of form state, okay, we can check if there are any errors. And if there are any errors, like an empty field, when it shouldn't be an empty field, we can render a small message inside the UI so the user knows that that field needs to be filled out. Okay, so this is what we are going to use. And now for each field, what we can do is to check if there are any errors. So firstly, we are going to access errors, and then we can access, in this case, so the only property that is not mandatory is name. Okay, so for username, it's mandatory. So errors dot username. If this is true, okay, we want to do something. We want to render like a p tag or a span tag, whatever, and we can say, we can actually display the error message. So we can go and do errors dot username in case there's one, and we can access the message itself. Okay, and the message for the username, in this case, it's going to be this one. It's going to be a message telling like, okay, the minimum length of this field is going to be 6 characters. Okay, And because this is a error message, we can actually style it a bit. So we can do like with full flex justify justify start, I guess, justify start, and text red 700, something like this. I can now refresh and test to see if SOD is validating the field or not and if there's an error. And because this field username is actually required, if I try to submit without filling out the field, I get this message. And this 6 is coming from this minimum length that we have defined here. So now for the other fields, apart from the optional one, we can do the same thing like we did here. So let's do it. As you can tell, I added the error handling for the inputs that are required. So for the email and also for the message. So if I refresh, okay. Now if I try to submit the form without filling out the fields, of course I get all of the messages and I cannot do anything. But if I add like the username, okay, see, 6 digits, the error message is gone. I can now move on, and this is not mandatory, not required, so I can move on. The email is invalid, so let's do alex@gmail.com. Boom, the error is gone. And finally the message that only requires one character, but I'm gonna say hello, and I'm gonna press send, and this should submit the data. And I got this object with all of the data. So this is working. Now it's time for the last step. Step number 3. We need to provide some user feedback inside the UI, because guess what? I click the button, I am submitting the data, but there's no way the user can tell for sure that the data was submitted. So we are going to do two things. We are going to change the text inside this button. Okay, we are going to check if this data is getting submitted or not, and depending on that, the text inside the button will change. And later we will use a library to display like a toast message so the user can tell for sure that the data was actually submitted. Now, with the help of isSubmitting boolean that we are getting from form state, we can check if the button was pressed or not, okay? Because what I did is I disabled the button by definition, and it's gonna check if this boolean is either true or not. So if it's true, if we are submitting data, we'll display this text inside, and if it's not submitting any data, we will display the standard message. And for this to work, we also need to change our custom function right here to use async and await to create a new promise. And I'm setting a timeout, okay, in this case 5 seconds, to create like a delay. So imagine that you really were submitting data to the server. Normally it takes like a few seconds. In this case, I wanted to be a bit dramatic and use it 5 seconds. So now, before console logging the data, we will have to wait 5 seconds to see if this works. So I'm gonna refresh. I'm gonna do Alex, whatever. Can go with this, I can go with this, and I can also do this. And now, if I press this button, see, sending data takes 5 seconds. And we actually can see the console log here. See, I don't really have to open the browser's console or anything. I have the data right here. So this is good, okay? We gave the user some feedback, but to wrap this up, we are going to use this library to provide the user with a UI notification, a toast message. In case the user is not paying attention to this button, we'll see for sure the message popping up right here. Right, so let's create this toast message. So first we need to add this toaster to our root page. So we need to go to our layout file, to the root, and in here I can import toaster, this one, okay, and this means right before my children I can actually use toaster at the root level, so I have access to those notifications from anywhere inside my application. And I'm gonna pass the position, which is going to be bottom right. You can play with these configurations, of course. And I also want to use the rich colors. Okay, now that I have access to this library at the root level, I can come back to my form, and inside my form I can actually display the message. And this means that after resolving this promise, I want to go ahead and use the toast, and I need to, okay, I have that imported already, so I'm using the toast. I'm gonna access the info, okay, and I'm gonna pass the message, and the message is going to be something like, we got your email, something like this. Okay, if I now refresh, this should all work. I'm gonna do this test. I'm gonna call this last test, doesn't really matter. I'm gonna press the button, sending data, and there you have it. We got your email, and as you can see, the data was actually submitted. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe for more tutorials like this one, and share this content so more people can have access to it. See you on the next video.